and just relax and breathe out. Then you'll be in an excellent headspace for this talk. So I'm going to get started. So my name is Dr. Lorian Taylor. I am a registered dietitian, and I am also the CEO of LifeMD, and I've worked for a number of years now with Dr. Natasha Haskey, who is just an inspiration to me and in terms of the work that she does. So I just want to get a little bit of housekeeping out of the way. If you do have any questions, you can please put them in the chat as we go. And if we have time at the end, we'll try and summarize the main ones and then address them. If we don't have time at the end, we will use them to help inform our next webinars in terms of when we're talking about microbiome and what people are interested in. So please feel free to put those questions you have in the chat. So I want to get started because I want to just use all of Dr. Haskey's time that we have. So I'm going to introduce her. So Dr. Natasha Haskey is a research associate in the Department of Biology at the University of British Columbia and Okanagan in Kelowna, British Columbia. Her research explores how diet shapes the intestinal microbiome and influences digestive diseases, especially inflammatory bowel disease. And Natasha and I, Dr. Haskey and I, have worked on a number of projects together in this space. And I really believe her work is revolutionizing this space. She is a registered dietitian and clinician scientist with over 2 decades of experience. She led the first study investigating the Mediterranean diet's influence on ulcerative colitis. Dr. Haskey is also co-author of the textbook Gut Microbiota: Interactive Effects on Health and Nutrition and IBS for Dummies. In parallel with her research, she practices as a dietitian and partners with LifeMD, which is our digital wellness platform, to support individuals with inflammatory conditions. She is an alumna of Triangle and the Advanced Dietary IBD Education and Training Program at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, which is a very prestigious training program for gastrointestinal health. And she combines rigorous academic training with applied nutrition expertise, positioning her at the forefront of precision nutrition and gut health. So Natasha, thank you so much for agreeing to speak for us today, and I'm just very excited for your talk.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Taylor, for the kind introduction and kind words. It's always a pleasure to be here, and it's also a blessing for me to actually work with you. And thank you to the LifeMD team for having me speak today. And of course, this is one of my most favorite topics, so I hope my enthusiasm actually comes through on the talk today. So what I want to do today really is get down to the basics around the microbiome. I find that there is so much confusing information. The information can be very conflicting, and not all of it is actually based on real rigorous science. And so this passion of mine actually drove me to do a PhD much later in life, just because I want to. The goal really is to spread awareness on the microbiome and how it can actually help us, but I want the correct information to get out to both health professionals and people like yourselves. So I always like to try and make my presentations as practical as possible. And I think what I also like to focus on is what matters, what sticks. It's not about gut health trends per se, or extreme diets like we're seeing in social media. What I talk about is grounded in scientific evidence. And it's actually even quite difficult for myself to keep up with all the research and science, because it's just everybody's interested in it. I don't want to say everybody, but it's a very interesting field, and it's changing rapidly. So sometimes I do a presentation on a topic, and in a year, the science has already changed. So first of all, I want us to understand that the gut microbiome actually influences more than just digestion. When I was going to school, which I'll honestly admit was about 25 years ago, when we talked about the gut, it was really only focused on digestion. We knew nothing about the importance of all these microbes. What really fascinates myself is when I learned that 60 to 80% of our immune cells are actually found in our gut, meaning the gut is our largest organ of immunity. And so it's a key place where our immune system learns what we can tolerate and what we need to fight off. But the what we know now is the microbiome also influences not only our immune system, but it interacts with our hormones, it interacts with our nervous system, it interacts with a variety of cells and organs. So that's why when we talk about not only food, but we know that the microbiome affects sleep and mood regulation and how we have gain and lose weight, how our interacts. So I think the key takeaway here is that yes, um, the gut microbiome is linked to the gut, obviously, but it's also very deeply connected to the rest of the body. So I think we've sort of covered this topic, but I'd be curious, what was really driving you to attend today's webinar? So if there should be a poll on the side, and if some of you would be willing to answer that, then um, it will help sort of frame my presentation. So I'm seeing some of you have a diagnosis already and are feeling some changes in your gut, interest in the microbiome testing, and all those sort of other surrounding factors, things that seem maybe a little bit off, like energy and maybe not sleeping well. So this is great. I will this webinar is actually for you. So we're going to talk about a little bit about all these areas. And as we mentioned, like please put your questions in the chat because this isn't the only webinar we're going to offer by any means. It's just we want to get the basics, and then from here on we can delve into various topics on a deeper level because it is a really big area of study. So a lot of people ask me the question, what are some signs that my maybe microbiome isn't balanced? And what I often say to them is that it can be very individual. It depends on you as a person, and so we really do need to be in touch with our own bodies. But some signs that may suggest that something's a little bit off is that, you know, when you do eat various foods or you're feeling stressed or not sleeping well, you're experiencing bloating, perhaps gas with foods, you're seeing stool changes. For some people, it's diarrhea, some people, it's constipation. That feeling of fatigue and brain fog could be related to changes in your microbiome. um, Changes in how we feel after we eat certain foods. And so we refer to those as not food allergies, but more becoming sensitive to different foods. And that may be because your microbiome has shifted, as well as we know the direct links between the gut and the brain. So that's where these mood changes could be occurring. So it could be around stress, but we know it's closely linked to depression and anxiety. So again, another kind of poll question. What symptom do you think shows up most often for you at this point? And so I think we'll launch the poll. There we go. Oh, we're got a little bit of inconsistency, but that's okay. Okay, I think we kind of answered, we've got some early answers, so we'll just um, keep filling in these polls and I'll keep moving forward. Okay, so my goal for today actually is what I want you to leave, what I want you to leave with. I want you to have a clear understanding of the microbiome. I don't want you to walk away feeling completely overwhelmed, where you feel like you just can't do anything because there's so many things that you feel you need to do, or you just don't know where to start. I want you to understand what really matters most when it comes to gut health. I'm going to talk about some of the common mistakes or common quick fixes that people talk about and why I don't recommend them. And then, really, what matters most for supporting gut health long term. So, really, this webinar is made for people that have those ongoing gut symptoms. So, you may not even have a diagnosis yet. You may not have irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel disease, but just maybe noticing some changes in gut symptoms. Um, you may also feel like that you're seeing changes in weight, you're seeing changes in your mood. It's also we will cover why it may be interesting for you to pursue microbiome testing and how LifeMD can actually help support you through all these um, different facets. So, like I said, I'm going to start way back at the beginning because I think it's important to understand more about what the microbiome actually is. So, when we do talk about the microbiome, we are referring to the trillions and trillions of bacteria. It could be viruses, it could be fungi that live not only in our bodies, but on our bodies. But the most concentrated area, or I would say probably the most well-studied area at this point, is in the gut. But the microbiome does encompass much more than just the gut. It covers, we have a skin microbiome, we have one in our nose, we have an oral microbiome. We know there's a microbiome even in blood and all the various tissues. They just haven't been as well researched as the gut, simply because it's easy to access the gut. And we look at these trillions of microbes through a lot of times through various, something as simple as looking at our stool samples. Now, most people, or historically, we've really thought of these microbes as something we need to be afraid of. We typically have associated microbes or bacteria as um, things that cause infection, that cause various diseases. But now we have a better understanding in that there's different categories of microbes, and many of these are actually beneficial for health and actually essential for health. And as time goes on, we're losing some of these microbes because our diets and environments are changing. So that piece is a little bit concerning. So, as I mentioned, today we're really going to focus on the gut and really focus more on the bacteria. There's areas of science that are studying just the fungi themselves, the viruses themselves, but most of the research where we can translate into practice is really looking at the microbes, that being bacteria. And so we know that these bacteria are very important in digesting our foods. So it's no longer just the typical digestive enzymes, the typical organs we always talk about, the stomach, the pancreas, the liver, etc., the intestines, but the microbes play a really important in digestion as well. So for example, I'm sure you've heard that fiber is quite important to the microbiome because that's the fuel for these actual microbes. But more than that, an interesting field of study is that these microbes, it's not just about who's living there, like which microbes are which, it's actually what these microbes are actually producing. So as these microbes break down various food sources, we find that they actually produce various compounds. And so as researchers, we're also studying the compounds that are produced by these various microbes. And what's interesting about these microbes is that they don't just stay in the gut. They actually travel, number one, interact with our immune system. So as I mentioned earlier, about 60 to 80% of our cells, immune cells living in the gut. That's why these compounds are constantly, and the microbes are constantly interacting with these cells in our gut. And that's where this immune system piece comes in. And so, just like the immune system tends to learn how to tolerate different foods, different microbes that it comes to contact with. And if our immune system is out of balance, which is linked to the microbes, then it, wants to actually fight them. The goal of our immune system is to actually keep us safe. So it's actually trying to fight some of these microbes. So if we don't have beneficial ones that are sitting there making everything happy and providing the nutrients we need, that's why we get this chronic inflammation happening. And it's closely linked to chronic disease. The microbiota produce vitamins and have a role in producing these what we call signaling molecules. And these signaling molecules actually are what travel throughout the body. So they can um, send signals to our brain, they can send signals to our heart, our liver, and our kidney. So it's not, these compounds are not just staying as in the gut, they're traveling throughout. And so one way I like to think about the microbiome is that it's something that we need to grow over time and nurture all the time. It's not like we're born, like when we're born with our lung, our kidney, our heart. It is what it is. But the microbiome it starts being influenced right at birth, and then throughout our whole life. So the good news is it's something that we can actually change, and we can change it with diet within a period of 3 days. Another key point I actually feel is important to emphasize is that everybody's microbiome is unique. And I know we all like to talk about health and wellness, and talk with our families and partners and friends. But when we're talking about the microbiome, we have to be quite careful because everybody's microbiome is so unique. They've likened it to our own individual fingerprint. They've used that analogy to explain it. So your microbiome might be different than a friend's, but it may be similar to the individuals in your family because you are sharing the same particular environment. And what that actually, what this boils down to is that it's very hard to generalize what everyone needs. And make a blanket statement about the microbiome because we really need to delve into what's going on with you. Because maybe your concern is you're not sleeping well. So maybe we have to address things from that angle. Or maybe you're having a different type of digestive symptom. So maybe we would use different tactics to help you improve your microbiome. So the other thing is that we don't have a perfect microbiome, or we haven't actually figured that out yet in the science, which makes it very challenging. So to go and make blanket statements about various concepts around the microbiome, it's just that we're not quite there yet. And the example I like to use is that somebody may say, well, you have to eat this for your microbiome. Well, maybe that's not the best thing for your particular microbiome. It might be for theirs, but maybe not for your own. And finally, I think what matters most is that being in touch with your own body and understanding what's going on with your body. Um, we need to be cognizant of our own symptoms. And so if you're doing something and it's helping you reduce symptoms, then that's probably what's right for your body, but it may not work for the next person. And so we do have the opportunity with LifeMD to do some microbiome testing and sort of look at you as an individual and how you potentially could make changes to your particular diet. And then the only way to assess that is, is that working for you? And symptoms is one way we can actually look at that. So we're not looking for perfection here. We're not looking for the perfect microbiome. We're looking at things that we can support long term and can help you function better as a human being. So, what's amazing for me as a dietitian, I've been a dietitian for over 25 years, and we've been talking about many of these concepts over and over again. But what I find interesting is that people have a hard time adapting a lot of the concepts we talk about, but yet more and more evidence is saying that some of the concepts as dietitians we've been recommending for years actually work to help improve that microbiome. So, simple concepts like eating regular meals. And so, the reason for that, we have science in the microbiome. Your gut bacteria actually follow daily rhythms. And so, just like we do with our schedules. So, the gut microbes want predictable meal times. And so, following these predicted meal times or having somewhat of a regulated schedule can actually be something that's beneficial for gut health. We know that sleep and circadian rhythm are very closely tied to the microbiome. So we know that if you're having poor or irregular sleep, that can actually disrupt the gut microbiota, because these microbes like a consistent sleep wake schedule. So sleep hygiene is really important, and there's some really interesting research on shift work or people that have jet lag, and what it shows is that these type of inconsistent schedules actually throw off the microbiome because of the fact that our microbes run on this daily clock. And so that's why consistent routines can actually be quite helpful. Drastic diet swings can really have a negative impact on the gut microbiome. So, jumping suddenly from a low fiber diet to a high fiber diet, it's no wonder that people get more digestive symptoms like gas and bloating. It's just because if you haven't been consistently eating a higher fiber diet, and typically you're eating a low fiber diet, you just probably don't even have the microbes to break those fiber sources down. Now, we know that we don't have the digestive enzymes to break it down, so it gets to the colon. And if you don't have the microbes, it's almost like the microbes start panicking. Um, there's just too much food, and it just can't be digested and absorbed by those microbes. So the only thing that happens is fermentation, and fermentation means gas, bloating, distension. And finally, I really like to emphasize the importance of stress management. Stress management really affects the gut brain connection. It changes how our gut moves, so gut motility. It can impact how people feel. There are some links to inflammation, and it makes it difficult for those microbiota to survive. So that's where we talk about in LifeMD mindful breathing, gentle movement, and just creating a routine for overall better health. So key takeaway again, if I key takeaway from this presentation really is small, steady changes in your habits done consistently are going to have the most benefit. So no quick fix. So there's so much interest in the gut brain axis, and this could be a whole webinar unto itself, or even a couple, just because it's even a field of specialty that goes beyond what I study. So I think this really segues into this two-way communication that happens between the gut and the brain. It's happening all the time. And I think it's important to know that the conversation between the brain and the gut actually goes both ways. So what affects your brain affects your gut, and what's going on your gut is going to affect your brain. And so the main pathway this actually occurs through is one of our nerves, and it's called the vagus nerve. And it is really a direct communication between the gut and the brain. But even on a wider spectrum, there's a whole bunch of hormones, and I talked about all these cell signals that are involved in how we feel. So they can influence stress and our mood and inflammation. And I think the key takeaway here is that I think, when I started out my career, we really thought, oh, it's just in your head, it's just in your head. But we've moved so far past that and realized there is a biological reason for why, when your gut is not feeling well, you do feel that you could feel anxiety, depression, brain fog. And it's also closely linked together. So I think to feel better, you need to look at all of these aspects of your health and not be afraid to seek help in these areas. And so this just is basically a summary slide just to say that there is that biological reason for why you may feel off when your gut microbiome is off, just due to this complex connection between the gut and the brain. So, again, going back to how do we break this cycle? Well, the predictability of meals, which I talked about, and gentle exposure to foods. So, example I like to use is a lot of people hear about the benefits of fermented foods, and they want to start. That's maybe a first step for them. I'm going to add more fermented foods in their diet. So they go to the store and they buy the kefir and the yogurt and the sauerkraut and say, okay, well, I'm going to start that today. And then the next day, they just feel awful. It could be, and I speak from experience here. So uh, sometimes it's going too quickly. Like, let's start with a tablespoon. If you're not used to eating fermented foods, it's going to do same thing as going from low to high fiber. Start small. Well, maybe we have a tablespoon of, say, a sauerkraut, see what it does to us. Oh, no problem. Well, maybe I can have 2 tablespoons tomorrow and see what it does. So that's what I mean, and what we mean as gentle exposure to foods. Stress reduction techniques that can be what works with your schedule. Maybe it's meditation. We've got some good research on the health benefits of yoga, and then not being afraid to look for support like psychological counseling or psychotherapy, because there's some really good evidence around hypnotherapy as well when it comes to these types of symptoms. So let's switch gears. You're here to learn a little bit more about diet. So I want to kind of give the high level recommendations when it comes to overall gut health. So, first and foremost, we hear over and over again the importance of eating a diversity of plants. And so, the greater the variety, the greater types of fiber you can get into your diet. And so, we often, if in a healthy microbiome where we're not experiencing a lot of symptoms, our goal is to get up to 30 different plants a week. So that counts. That doesn't mean 30 a day, that means 30 a week. So that's just mixing things up, having the broccoli, the kale, the lettuce, the strawberries, the blueberries, etc. The reason for that is that each vegetable, fruit, fiber source has a different type of fiber, which is going to feed that microbiome. And that's what we want to do, is nurture all different kinds of bacteria to actually make that microbiome stronger, including fermentable fibers if tolerated. And so what I mean by that is that there are, the more we know about fibers, it's becoming a little bit more complex. It's not just one fiber equals all. Again, that's where you need the personalized choice, personalized advice, working with someone with LifeMD, a dietitian, or one of our health coaches to help guide you in the right direction for fiber sources that may actually work for you. Limiting ultra processed foods. So, what we mean by ultra processed foods are those packages that have all those ingredients that we can't pronounce. And as we learn more and more about ultra processed foods, we're getting more and more concerned about how they actually affect the microbiome. Specifically, a lot of them have these emulsifiers, preservatives that we're starting to see. Certainly in more of our animal models. We can't do this in humans, but it's actually thinning the mucus barrier in our gut. And that mucus barrier is really an important protective mechanism. So if it's thinning our gut, it's probably not something we want to put into our diet. So moving towards more whole based foods. So, for example, an apple, you eat an apple, it doesn't have a label versus something like, um, another product per se, like a pizza that's frozen in an aisle, in a frozen fruit aisle. So trying to um, consume less ultra processed foods, and then prioritizing those stress management techniques. And we have a point here about unnecessary antibiotics. And I do want to make a point here. Unfortunately, a lot of antibiotics will wipe out all of the good and bacteria. There are some that are a little bit less, I guess, harmful, and don't wipe as much of the microbes out. But there are a few things we can do probiotic wise to help prevent some of the um, diarrhea associated with antibiotics. But if antibiotics are needed, then there's a time and place for it. It's just what our society has done is overprescribed antibiotics. So that's why we're getting a lot of these antibiotics not working in some of these super pathogens. So there has been a little bit more conscious effort by the medical community to not unnecessarily prescribe antibiotics, but sometimes you absolutely need them for your health. So what about all these superfoods we're seeing? I think one example I like to use, and I was just talking to a group of students today about this, was some of these drinks that are fortified with prebiotics. This is an example of some superfoods that are saying, you know, it's going to enhance gut health. Unfortunately, the companies are upcharging a lot for these particular products. And honestly, the amount that of prebiotic that's in these particular products is probably not enough to make a difference. So my hard and fast rule is we need to get it through natural sources through our diet. You're going to have much more bang for your buck and health benefits. The other thing is that unfortunately we know there's no magic bullet to improving health, despite all the advertisements. And so I think um, slow and carefully adding foods into your diet is the way to go. Because obviously these habits are actually going to be more sustainable. I think of superfoods as things like berries, greens, this smoothie, for example. That's an easy way to get quite a few of those plant-based foods into your diet on a daily basis. And it can be made from, doesn't have to be made from fresh fruit or vegetables if you don't have access. Frozen can work as well. And then it's not just, I guess the analogy I like to use is that if your diet is of lower quality, so it is high in sodium, and perhaps you're not eating the good types of fats, and eating a lot, eating out at fast food restaurants, for example, just by adding one item like a superfood that you're going to pay more for is probably not going to make a difference. We need to look at a change that's going to have an overall impact on your diet, not just sort of those quick fixes. So I hear a lot about, we should be drinking lemon water, because that's healthy. And in all honesty, sure, lemon water, great for hydration if it helps you drink more fluids, which is also very important. Um, yes, we should include that in our diet. Is it going to be the magic trick to improving our health and overall gut microbiome? Probably not. Sparkling water, if you're using it to replace some sugary beverages in place of, say, having excess caffeine and things like that, certainly it can be beneficial. But I do caution that some of the sparkling beverages, if you do have gas, bloating, IBS like symptoms, it could be something contributing to I guess increasing those symptoms. And I do want to emphasize that there really is no liver cleanse or drink that is actually going to cleanse your body. Your body has those um, that ability to do it on its own. So you're actually wasting money and potentially could be doing more harm, because by my thought process is that if you are washing out a lot of those microbes, then you could be potentially washing out some of the good ones, and so then you actually have to start from scratch. So um, it's just something that I think we should take note of. What about protein, fats, and sugars? So protein is huge right now. We're seeing, it seems like things have switched over now to, we need protein bars, we need protein shakes, and just this overemphasis, I think, on proteins. And I think it's really important when we're talking about the gut microbiome to think about what type of protein sources we're actually eating, because some of these protein sources can actually be detrimental to the microbiome. Protein and not high amounts of protein, just we're looking for adequacy here. Things like eggs, nuts and seeds, things like yogurt tend to be a little bit, cottage cheese tend to be a little bit, um, they're sort of, they are higher protein sources, but let's use it more in a way to support our metabolism versus and building muscle, and not, because too much protein we know actually hits the colon, and the microbes that like to cause disease, we call those pathobionts, love to flourish in that type of environment. And actually it's been shown to be somewhat detrimental. Red meat, for too much red meat, for example, has shown to be detrimental in in colitis in particular. So I think we need to take note of that. We need to use, I would say, microbiome friendly fats. And as Dr. Taylor mentioned, I've studied the Mediterranean diet in depth. And really, the reason I chose to use this study for my research studies and going forward is because the components of the Mediterranean diet are anti inflammatory or have been shown to have health benefits. So when it comes to fats, we need to focus more on using the olive oils, monounsaturated fats. Another option is avocado oil or avocados. And lastly, we know that high sugar diets have an impact on the microbiome through reducing the amounts of the healthy microbes. So again, not surprising, when we talk about Mediterranean diet, what I like about it is that it does allow sweets a couple times a week. It's not complete abstinence. It's like, yes, you can have your sweets, but twice a week, not every day or two times a day. So I get lots of questions around pre and probiotics. And again, we could have a whole presentation just on probiotics or prebiotics itself, because it's a whole category. But I do want to mention that probiotics are considered, they have to be live bacteria. And as a result of that, another piece to probiotics, in order for something to actually be called probiotic, it actually has to have scientific studies to support its benefit. So it can get a little bit confusing because we hear people talking about probiotics in various fermented foods. A lot of times they may not actually be considered probiotic. They're more considered live active culture, meaning they don't meet the criteria for a probiotic. So it can be a little bit confusing as a consumer what is actually a probiotic versus not. But what you should be looking for something that's a probiotic, it actually will have like a what we call a natural health number at the bottom. So it'll say NPN, and then that means it's met that criteria for probiotic. Key thing about probiotics, they're transient, meaning they go in and they go out. So we haven't figured out a way to create a probiotic supplement that you could take once and it sticks with you. So that's why there's this repeated. You need to take them repeatedly, and we don't actually know what the appropriate dosage is for many of these strains. There's not a lot of science, so a lot of companies are going by, well, we tried this for this particular study, and this is what worked. And so the reason why probiotics can and cannot work for everyone is because if you think about it, there are trillions of microbes. A probiotic is just one strain, or it could be a few strains. But if we're dealing with a trillion bacteria, how do we know which bacteria we should actually supplement for you? And what gets even more confusing is that these microbes all don't always work in isolation. They work in groups. And so there may be 10 microbes that work together and this microbe doesn't. And it really is dependent what's going on in your gut. So there are some situations where probiotics are recommended, and that is there's a beautiful guide. It's called the Clinical Guide to Probiotic Supplements. It lists all the probiotic supplements that are available in Canada and what the evidence is for it. So if you just Google that, it should pop up. And they have guides for Europe and the United States. Next, I'll move on to the topic of prebiotics. Prebiotics are actually the fibers that feed the probiotics. So that's why you'll often see these two things put together in a supplement. So in general, prebiotics are food for the actual microbes. And so that includes things like you'll see inulin, fructooligosaccharides, resistant starch. So they actually feed the good bacteria. And depending on your situation, we have to be cautious in irritable bowel syndrome and IBD because some people will react to these prebiotics. But again, I find them to be probably more useful in the long term when it does come to supplementing. So my bottom line about probiotics is it's not for everyone. I think we do have to be cautious if you are immunocompromised. And really, it boils down to what type of strain or the actual bacteria you're using, because it tells us how it's going to function in the actual in your particular in your body. So it's like one strain of probiotic doesn't do the same thing for every condition. So what about some foods that actually support the microbiome? I've kind of highlighted them already, but we know that a variety of vegetables, colors, um, are beneficial to the microbiome. Um, if you are sensitive, even trying to add them in gradually, cooking them well. So just start with cooked vegetables. Don't go straight to the broccoli, cauliflower, because you probably will have symptoms. Um, we want whole grain foods like oats, rice, potatoes, and potatoes and rice, pasta, if you cook and cool them, it creates resistant starch. And so think about batch cooking. So if you cook your rice on Sunday for the week, you let it cook, you cool, it creates, when you reheat it the next day, it creates a kind of starch that we actually don't digest. It hits the colon, the microbes ferment it, and produces all these healthy substances. Now, legumes is another area. We as Canadians definitely don't eat enough, but we see such, again, they're really rich in that resistant starch. A lot of people say they can't tolerate it, but again, don't start out with a lentil soup with high amounts of lentils. Even just start with like a teaspoon added onto a salad. If you do okay with that, then increase. Um, Gradually, and then develop a tolerance. Each little step, you're getting more and more of these different types of fibers into your diet. Or if you're using canned, sometimes the canned vegetables by if you really rinse them well, you're getting rid of what we call galacto-oligosaccharide, and that's what's a lot of times cause that bloating and gas. We want good fats, which come from olive oil, nuts, and seeds. And when you're consuming your nuts and seeds, if it's been a problem in the past, using things like nut butters as an alternate way to get some of these nuts and seeds in, like you could try almond butter, cashew butter, things like that, pumpkin butter. Um, and the nuts and seeds should be not, we're not looking at the ones that have all the salt on it. We want them, they can be roasted, but naturally unsalted. And then I also mentioned the fermented foods. So again, I don't want you walking away from this webinar and saying, I'm going to just eat a whole bunch of fiber, because a lot with fiber, we really need to gradually increase the dose. And so again, slow and slow, so you don't end up with these symptoms and then just sort of give up. And that's where it really can be helpful to meet with one of our dietitians. Soluble fiber, so things like we had on the previous slide, like the oatmeal, psyllium, they can be often a little bit gentler, a little bit easier to tolerate than, say, running out and starting to eat um, 2 bran muffins a day or something like that. I know it's an over exaggeration, but I've heard it all from different clients. And so low and slow is what we actually recommend. And so I get a lot of questions around fiber supplements. And again, anyone with digestive issues should start really slow. There's a multitude of supplements out there. And I think meeting with someone can actually help guide you on a supplement that might work for you, because there's so many different types, and we can supplement with foods. We can supplement with foods. We can try that first before you jump to a supplement. But we can also recommend different supplements, because different supplements you may need a supplement that's different if you have constipation, a different supplement than somebody that maybe has diarrhea or gas or bloating. And so I mentioned soluble fiber. You can do chia seeds, you can do ground flax seeds. Insoluble fibers are the ones that can be, they'll definitely add bulk. They're the ones that are helpful for those that have constipation, but again, may want to be cautious of that. The fermentable fibers are more of the inulin, garlic, legumes. And it, again, may be troublesome for some people with IBS, but not all. And lastly, non-fermentable fibers, psyllium, and some of the resistant starches that are available on the market. So now I just want to mention a little bit about microbiome testing, and Charlie's going to come on in a couple minutes here and just talk a little bit more about what we offer with LifeMD. But I don't want to say that the microbiome testing, or I do want to emphasize, it's not here to provide a diagnosis, but it can be helpful to help guide our nutrition recommendations, and sort of help you focus in on, where do I even start? And perhaps more of a a more comfortable way of deciding on where to start than just sort of randomly saying, okay, we're just going to start this. So that's what microbiome can testing can do. So um, you get support also with your microbiome test, because we know you can go out there, you can get your microbiome tested. And what's happening, unfortunately, in the field is that people go and get a microbiome test, but don't have the support afterwards. They look at it and like, what does it mean? Well, without some interpretation, it can be very difficult to decide what to actually do, what's next. And by no means, like, we're not replacing medical treatment, we're just using it as a guide, to help guide therapeutic diet decisions. So, my key take home message really here is that your gut can be changed. We can make changes within 3 days. We don't necessarily want that. We don't want drastic changes, but we can make changes with diet, which is very exciting for me as a nutrition professional. Um, we need to deal with some of the other external factors, um, besides diet, like stress, dealing with routine, um, and mental health. And again, messages, small, steady changes, are what we find works best. So this was just something to pause and think about. I want you to think about after today, you know, what could you do, or what's one thing you could add into your diet and do it consistently, um, going forward. And that, I'm not sure if we have a poll, but if you could get help with just one thing, what would you say it would be?
Asha, and I think while people are filling in that poll, if we can just take a minute, there's a few questions I thought we could answer quickly before Charlie
Sure.
comes on. Um, there was a few questions about fasting. So one person had asked about water fast, and would a water only 2 or 3 day fast be beneficial for microbiome? And then the other person had asked about intermittent fasting.
Okay, that's a great question, because we just finished a trial in Crohn's disease, actually. And it was really fascinating. We didn't do a strict fast by any means. We did an intermittent fast where the individuals fasted for 16 hours and then were able to eat whatever they wanted during their window, 8 hour window of eating. And we actually found that what we're finding is that we did see benefit, which was really exciting, because um, I think it's something that's very doable in our lifestyle. Again, sort of that small steady change instead of like restricting. I get worried if, you're only drinking water for 3 days and all what is kind of going on in the body, and if you're on medications and all the other concerns. But we have found that there are some, for sure, some beneficial metabolic benefits to fasting. And we're looking at Crohn's disease patients, but we saw a reduction in symptoms. And that was the most rewarding for me. Like, for some people, it was, they just, it means a lot when somebody says, this has been life changing for me because I am able to get out of the house. So really interesting results. And there was just a new trial that also came out, a little bit more restrictive, but similar results, that it seems to be beneficial in our IBD population.
Thanks so much for that. I was also wondering if you could give a few examples of some more fermented foods. So, one person had asked about kombucha. You mentioned sauerkraut. What would be some other ideas that would be, or other foods that would be fermented?
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of all of the other cultures have fermented foods as a regular part of their diet. So one is kefir. Um, don't forget about our plain yogurts, kimchi, even sourdough bread. Now, a lot of people are like, well, like, aren't the microbes dead? But you know what? It's what I think, we don't know this, but a lot of the research focuses on what those microbes are producing. So I think it's more what the compounds that our microbes are producing that are beneficial in fermented foods. Putting, we always talk about the microbes. So sourdough, the more it ferments, the more sour it gets. Well, there's more of those acids, and that's what's actually helpful for the microbiome.
And do you have any concerns about kombucha in terms of it being brewed at home versus what you might buy in a store?
I think we have to be cautious. But what's interesting is that with fermented foods, we've been doing it for thousands of years. And it was a food preservation technique. Now, if you are fermenting, and you can also do pickles, vegetables, things like that. You open it up and it just smells off. It probably is, right? So I think we always have to be cautious and still use um, sanitary techniques in preparing it. I'm not saying like just, oh, go wild and get you know, all these bacteria everywhere, but just be cognizant of that.
Okay, thank you so much. This was such an informative talk, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope the audience did as well. We'll now, I think Charlie's going to come and talk a little bit about LifeMD and then some of the microbiome testing that we have available.
If I may
Thank you.
may interject.
Yes.
This is just a guideline for people, and there's going to be a handout posted. So I'll move forward.
That's great. Thank you so much today for the presentation, Dr. Haskey, and for the questions, Dr. Taylor. It's been really informative. They always are. It's great being connected to anything that you have to share with us at LifeMD. What I'm able to do from here is be able to connect you to the right gut microbiome service. If there's something that you are interested in pursuing further, then you are able to scan the QR code and it'll give you a 15-minute call with myself. And I will be able to try and help you to find out if it's something that you think that would be of benefit for you. So we find out if you're interested in taking the Avivo kit, which is more dialed for women's health, or if it's more for the gut microbiome health, or the level of support that you wanted to get after. Dr. Haskey mentioned how it's not just about getting the report, it's interpreting the results afterwards and how we can then tailor that to find foods that will be able to fit with your eating. So there's various ways we can do that through our team. And I think one of the great things about being at LifeMD is the strength of our team and the interconnectedness that we all have with each other. So I will be a conduit to be able to pass your questions on to Dr. Taylor, Dr. Haskey, Dr. Rahman, who's hosted our last webinar, and our other dietitian team as well. Between them, there's a lot of experience there that we can sort of help to guide you so that you get the outcomes that you're looking for. I think when I speak to people, they're often saying, I've tried this, I've tried to do that, I've tried to eliminate this. And I think part of what we're able to provide through the test from the gut microbiome is that it can help to become a little bit more like precision nutrition, and it can sort of identify a little bit more detail. Well, this is what your gut microbiome is telling us, and this is how we're able to tailor foods that you need to do to reduce something or improve something, because we're looking at like a range of where we consider healthy gut microbiome to be, and the suggestions will try and put you within that healthy range. So that's something that we can do. And it's great to see our last webinar, we had 200 registrants. This webinar, we've had over 300 registrants. It's great to see this area is growing. We don't have time to take individual questions. So that's why it could be perfect to have that time with me, because then I will be able to make sure that I can figure out the right solution for you. And it might be that there isn't one. There are certainly some people that are not suitable as well, but that's something that we can figure out and talk about as during the call. So if you are interested in finding out more, please do scan the QR code. I wasn't sure if there was going to be a link provided as well in the
Well,
chat.
yeah, we have added a link to the chat as well. So there is one that people can copy and paste or click on right in the chat.
That'd be great. And that brings us a minute before 6 o'clock. So thank you very much for your time, for joining us today. And please keep a lookout for our next webinars. But Dr. Haskey mentioned gut-brain axis. That's certainly an area of interest. And there's many more topics of conversation we can delve into in the future. So please do continue to sort of stay connected with us. But that's everything from the LifeMD team now. So thank you, everybody, and have a good evening wherever you are in Canada or
Yes,
the US.
thank you. And thank you so much, Dr. Haskey, too, for being here today.
Thank you
Bye,
for
everyone.
having me. Bye.